There's this very striking and to me very curious convergence of, one, a fixation on the idea of diversity, and two, a sincere inability to grasp what that actually means.
When Americans are celebrating diversity, they're mostly thinking of restaurants. What doesn't come to mind is people who are different from you in a bad way, right? Who oppress women. You know, people who are actually hostile to what you believe and dislike your society, not in that voluntary, gratuitous, but rather fun way, I think, that the progressive left loves to detest its own society. But that's a kind of ideological entertainment. It's very, very different from people who really do detest your society from the outside and would like to see it fail.
Welcome to Socrates in the City. This is Socrates Dialogues with Mary Harrington. Today I'm very privileged to be joined by a storied novelist, author of 18 books and counting, of which the latest is an acutely provocative new novel titled A Better Life, set amid the notoriously, can I say notoriously? I think notoriously.
As long as you know what the word means. Nobody knows what that word means anymore.
Okay, the remarkably porous border policies of the Biden administration, if I remember right.
I think I call them notorious.
Okay, notorious. We're going with notorious.
Word to the audience, it does not mean famous, it means infamous.
The notoriously squashy border policies of the Biden administration. And the MacGuffin, which is not a Latin word, for the story is a program which was proposed in New York City but never enacted, in which it was suggested migrants into New York City might be housed in private homes.
Yes.
The premise of the book is, what if they actually did this? And the story recounts in a narrative which begins with arch humour. I laughed out loud several points early on, and by the end I really was reading it through my fingers. What happens next? Lionel, will you tell us a little bit about the book? How did you come to write the book? What was it that inspired you to choose this particular acutely provocative topic?
Well, I'm drawn to acutely provocative topics.
It's about the no landmine that you don't see and want to stand on.
That's right. And stamp. Jump up and down.
Up and down. Okay, so you decided to jump up and down on the landmine of Joe Biden's porous immigration policy. Now, I read A Better Life more or less in one sitting over the course of a single plane flight. As I said, I found it very funny. I also found it increasingly just terrifying as I went on. I mean,
it's been called a thriller, and I think that's accurate.
A thriller. Is it a thriller? Is it a black comedy? Is it a farce? It sits somewhere in between all of these zones. I remember a Shakespeare critic whose name long since escaped me once said, "Farce is tragedy at 100 RPM." Which I think more or less captures the spirit of A Better Life. Now, when we talk about the policies and the social scenarios and the clashes of cultures which you depict so vividly in this book, do you think are we talking farce? Are we talking tragedy? Are we talking somewhere between the two?
Yeah, there's elements of farce, but I don't think there's anything about the plot that is implausible. I think it's completely realistic. It is, not to blow the plot too much, but I think you could probably categorize it as a home invasion story. And there are real-life problems with gangs of criminals taking over usually an older woman's house, and she can't get rid of them, and they use it as a base of operations. It even has a name in law enforcement. It's called cuckooing.
Yeah, it happens in England as well.
Yeah. So, there was a review recently that accused the book of having a completely ridiculous, impossible ending. That's not true. Not remotely true. And I wanted to keep the events on a real life scale. So while I think it does qualify as a thriller, it doesn't go into those impossible chase scenes that we're used to. it remains very life-size.
There's a quality about it as well. I mean, it seems bizarre to go from cuckooing and home invasions to comedy of manners, but there's an aspect to the story which I read in more or less in the register of comedy of manners, in the sense that you're sort of yelling. I found myself wanting to yell at the page, "Do something! Come on, do something! Can you not see this coming from space?"
Right.
And somehow the characters in it are constrained by their beliefs, by their taboos, by their thought world, their idea world, their emotional landscape, such that they can't do the obvious thing. They can't step out of their usual characters. They can't step out of what's considered polite or socially acceptable. Do you think there's something? I mean, is there something that you want to tell the world about the prevailing condition of our?
Well, I'm looking at a particular ideology which we have been afflicted by for coming up on, 15 years, which I've noticed we are less and less calling woke. Everyone is sick of that word. We've now, over in the UK, where we're speaking, they've started adopting American terminology, progressive. But it's full of conceits. And one of them is that the immigrant is an innocent. So the notion that immigrants would be coming into the country for transactional reasons, to take advantage of your welfare system, is anathema. Of course, that's not what's motivating them. They just want a better life, hence the title. I've pointed out in a previous Spectator column that whole expression, a better life, is simply a reformulation of, I want this, right? It's just, my life's going to be better if I go to your country instead of staying in mine, in the same way that everything we do is motivated by making our lives better, or we don't do it. There's a purposeful naivete in relation to immigration on the part of the progressive. So they can never be criminals. They're always pulling out statistics which really don't stand up to scrutiny, that illegal immigrants are no more likely to commit crimes than the natives. In fact, are less likely. Actually, I do scrutinize that statistic in the novel. And obviously on the right, there's the opposite impulse, that they're all criminals and rapists according to Trump, and that doesn't stand up to statistical scrutiny.
And some, I assume, are good people.
Yeah, but that insistence that immigrants are completely innocent, that they have no predatory intent, they have no territorial intent, which is flat out wrong, because they do, in fact, take over whole territories. The left is very attached to that, and so they refuse to recognize any malign purpose, any incidence of criminality. That projection of innocence is itself a form of innocence, and that's why the mother in the book takes way too long to take seriously what's happening in her own home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, you live between Brooklyn and Portugal, if I remember right. And my sense is, just from how intimately observed the central characters in the book, they live in Ditmas Park, is that how you say it?
That's correct.
In Brooklyn.
Yes.
They live in a lovely period house, which has been lovingly restored by the paterfamilias, although he's now exited to a different household.
They divorced.
They divorced. You describe in a minutely observed way the period detail of this house, the atmosphere inside the house. My sense is from those descriptions and the intimacy and the affection with which you describe that whole scenario, that these are your people. in a sense. That if you're depicting them as the willing or unwitting victims in a self-inflicted tragedy, which is really what the denouement of the book becomes, it's as much in sorrow as in anger. And it's as though there's something that you really want to say to people with whom you're intimately acquainted. These are in a sense your people.
Yeah, they are my people. I mean, I don't live in Ditmas Park, alas. I might be accused of architecture envy. It so happens, and this is really why I chose Ditmas Park. I spend the summer in Brooklyn, and we have a little house which doesn't compare to this neighborhood at all. It's that ours is small and falling apart. Ditmas Park used to be large and falling apart, but no longer, because it's been regentrified, and it's this neighborhood that was built at the turn of the last century, and the houses are enormous, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful. And I play tennis in Marine Park, which entails going through Ditmas Park on the way down and on the way up. So because I play tennis in the summer about 4 times a week, it means going through Ditmas Park 8 times a week. And we always take different routes, my tennis partner and I, just to look at different houses. And I love them. And in my secret parallel universe, I own one of them.
And let me guess, while you walk through Ditmas Park 8 times a week every summer, you're counting lawn signs and noting the insignia on lawn signs.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Ditmas is now completely covered with ice out of New York City.
And so there's my sense is that there's a particular subset of the good people of Brooklyn to whom you wish to whose attention you would like to bring this innocence, this naivety, this underestimation of the other.
Yeah, but I have to add, sadly, that these are the very people who are not going to buy this book, and these are the people who are reviewing the book and hating it. I mean, maybe it's for these people, but it's more about them than for them, because I knew when I was writing it that because the novel is implicitly critical of, among other groups in this book, the especially the female progressive. I knew that it was not going to find an audience with that group of people.
I suppose just sort of developing on that theme of innocence and underestimation of the other. Do you think that's a fair account of this stance, the Ice Out of New York stance, the expansively welcoming progressive stance, the people who are going to review your book and who are already reviewing your book and hating it, about whom this story is? Do you think it's fair to say that I mean, is it possible even to see the other as human, if we refuse to give any kind of an account of the human capacity for darkness, for evil, for
that's
selfishness?
A running theme in the book. The young man through whose eyes this story is seen is able to infer in the immigrant that his mother takes in a capacity for the darkness you mentioned. He's very suspicious of her, but in being suspicious of her and spotting her intelligence, spotting her ability to pursue her own self-interest, he's giving her a great deal more credit than his, wonderful, good, democratic mother.
Yeah, I found that a very striking theme in the book. In a sense, Nico, in treating this woman with in considering her capable of duplicity,
yes,
and capable of self-interest and capable of calculation, he is in fact of all of them the one who sees her most fully as human.
Yes,
as a person,
and therefore, what she's doing, whatever she's doing, is she's pursuing something on her own account. She comes across as incredibly generous and gracious and giving. So, she does all the cleaning and she cooks for the family and always cleans up the kitchen and does the shopping, et cetera, et cetera. But she's clearly, at the very least, she's set about methodically to make herself indispensable to this household because she doesn't want to leave. And that's obvious right away to both the reader and to Nico, the point of view character. So what else is she pursuing? And yeah, if you don't understand that immigrants to your country are out to get what you have, you're an idiot. And there is an element of predation involved, and intentionally so. Maybe they don't put it to themselves quite that way in their own heads, but it is an act of envy. It is, that looks like a better life to me. I want that for me. I see that on my phone every day. What pictures of the way people are living that is way better than the way we live in my country, and I'm going to go out and get it. And a lot of them have done their homework on what kind of benefits they can access. I would say most immigrants to the United States realize that in multiple states you can get signed up to Medicaid and, get all of your medical expenses covered. I think that immigrants to the UK are very well aware that if you rock up in a dinghy on the coast of Kent, that you will be put up in a 4-star hotel and given 3 meals a day and a weekly stipend and a subscription to Netflix.
There is a sense in which it has often struck me that the political architectures that we have perhaps not caught up with the world of instantaneous digital communication, especially actually visual instantaneous communication.
Yes, because it's the visual that inspires envy. If I just write an article about Ditmas Park and I don't have any photographs, that's not going to trigger your envy. It's too abstract. You can
I struggled to picture the red trim on the house, although I think it would be significant to somebody who's acculturated to that particular milieu. The red trim on the family lipstick red.
Trim. It's a kind of dusty blue color with lipstick red trim, so it really stands out.
And I think that means something if you live in Brooklyn, but I thought I struggled to pass that.
The name of the color?
No. What does it mean to have a blue house with red trim? What's the semiotically? What would that convey?
It calls attention to itself, right? It's not trying to fade back in.
Ooh, I'm quirky.
It's quirky and proud and trying to be beautiful. I thought that would be a good color combination. Very striking.
I'm sure it would be really pretty. It was just one of those things as a foreigner. I'm thinking that would be. And this is just an example of what would make instant visual sense communicated as a photo or a video. But
to return to your point, you're exactly right. That a lot of the latest wave of immigration has a great deal to do with the smartphone. Because the smartphone inspires it. It also facilitates it because it puts people in immediate contact with their predecessors. And so their predecessors can tell them what to do, what to tell immigration agents, what exact words to use, how to get access to various benefits. It's so much easier now. It also means that there are implications for what the immigrant experience is like on arrival, because we're no longer dealing with people who, of necessity, have to completely assimilate.
I was about to make that exact point.
They can keep in touch with their friends and families back home and continue to have a sense of connection and to partially live back home. Mm-hmm. And it calls them to never be completely present in the same way that we all suffer from that.
Yep.
Right?
In the same way as it facilitates political polarization within an existing polity, in that I don't need to interact with my next door neighbour who may have different opinions to me, because I can just spend all my time in my filter bubble and just doom scrolling.
And when we travel, right now, I'm on tour. I talk to my husband every day. So we're not really apart.
Right.
But whenever I'm talking to my husband back home, I'm not completely here.
That's right. That's right. Particularly when there's a time zone difference, when there's a language difference, and then suddenly there's the little screen with the familiar face and probably your kitchen in the background. And,
Yes.
We've all done it, and it's disorienting, but it's also comforting. And as you say, it detaches you partially from wherever it is.
Well, none of us travel in the same way
That's right.
we used to.
That's right.
You used to be really gone.
When I was a kid, we moved twice to different European countries, and I had this experience. I went to local language schools. We didn't go to international schools, so I perforce learned French and German just in order to function in school. And then when I came back, I never felt fully English in quite the same way as anybody else did. There's always a sense in which you're slightly other because you've had these formative experiences in places, like the comfort foods you eat, for example. The things that remind you of being 8. What happens when that's something that you can only buy in a French supermarket? I mean, it's trivial things like that, but in a sense, that's the warp and the weft of integrating into a host culture.
Yes, but
and with the smartphone, it's simply not necessary.
The other thing that the smartphone facilitates is translation.
That's right.
So in the book, there's one scene
these
where
awkward conversations that happen by Google Translate.
Yes,
that's right.
But they still succeed after a fashion.
Yeah.
I mean, there is communication, and there's a scene in the book where a couple of Africans who are staying in a nearby migrant shelter are begging door to door, and they're using their smartphone. They're using Google Translate to say, please, we are starving. Can you give us money? Of course, it's dubious because these migrant shelters have snacks on offer 24/7.
If I remember rightly, Nico just wants them to go away because he's got other things on his mind.
Yeah.
So he's just like, please, just take $20 and clear off.
Yes.
And you think if every third house down the street is doing that, then I imagine there's pretty good trade.
But the point is, they don't need to learn English for, please, we are starving. Would you give us some money, please? I found it means, I'm guilty of exactly the same thing because I recently moved to Portugal. I have no gift for languages, and I'm as lazy as anybody, really. So I can get away with not learning Portuguese and still, ring a plumber or go to the supermarket. I have learned to ask for 2 fillets of sea bass. That's of necessity. The people at the fish counter, I can't count on speaking English. But for the most part, I can get away with it. Between the smartphone and the fact that anyone under 40 in Portugal has studied English for years in school.
It's the new Latin.
Yeah. So, but that's also true. That's true of the immigrants we're absorbing in English-speaking countries, that they don't have to learn English in the same way that they would have had to a couple decades ago.
That's right. That's right. Now, you're fairly unforgiving and even-handed in your treatment of all the different I don't want to say belligerents, but I think I do actually sort of mean belligerents in the book, because they really do have antithetical and mutually exclusive needs and interests, in a way which is resolved quite brutally at the end of the book. And you're pretty even-handedly in the way you portray all of them as possessing flaws and desires. Nobody comes out as a saint, but there are a few points. I mean, one of the immigrant characters is basically, he's a gangster. That much, it's never explicitly spelled out, but like the sheer volume of ink you describe him as wearing all over his face and body, and his bearing and what he's doing and his this and that makes it very clear that these are gangsters in the most frightening and murderous and really no holds barred sense.
For the most part, don't ever do anything violent.
No, because they don't need to.
They don't need to.
They don't need to.
They just exude the threat of violence.
They just exude
that is enough to get what they want.
The very meaningful possibility of violence. And one of those characters, I think he probably expresses most bluntly and cheerfully the the attitude that we're just going to come and take this because we can.
Yes.
And he describes the Americans in quite contemptuous terms as pushovers.
Yes.
As you're just seeding and seeding and seeding. You just give ground every time somebody pushes, and so we're going to come here and we're going to take it. Again, I don't want to give away the really explosive ending of the book, but the final scenes I found quite. There's right at the end. Nico returns to his old house, and he witnesses this quite sort of bucolic scene, which really is like a recreation of the American dream. It just doesn't have him in it anymore. And I suppose I want. Is there a sense in which we could read the whole thing? Your whole, the incoming cuckoos in this story as kind of anti-heroes, who've secured the bag because they can, just through sort of sheer
there is a kind
life
of
force.
begrudging admiration of the immigrants in this book, and a disproportionate number of my Central American characters are thugs. And so it's a particular sector of the immigrant population, and it is not necessarily trying to paint all immigrants with this criminal brush, but there is a real admiration in the book of people who take what they want and who go out and get it. Who are actors in their own lives, and what is sometimes underappreciated in this book is that it is extremely critical of the host population.
That comes very clearly.
It's sympathetic with the plight of the host population in a way that I think most novels are not. But they don't get off lightly at all. They are portrayed as passive,
cowardly,
weak,
impotent,
exactly, and basically they're asking for it. They're sitting ducks.
And your gangster character spells this out very clearly, and yet they still don't throw him out.
Because when you allow people to take advantage of you, it doesn't engender in the person who's taken advantage of you a sense of admiration and gratitude.
When I was a student, there was a phrase that went in student houses that went around called idiot tax, which is to say if you leave £5 on the counter and you come back and it's not there anymore, that's the idiot tax.
Yes. This is all about the idiot
tax.
So when you allow yourself to be a sitting duck, then that inspires contempt. And it also inspires people to take more advantage of you. It's like, well, this is great. And the immigrants in this book have figured out how to extract as much as possible from the host population. And why shouldn't they? That's what, in this case, New York City is allowing. I mean, there's a page in the book just listing all the programs that these migrants coming up through the southern border during the Biden administration can take advantage of. And it's really astonishing. I mean, I actually had to cut it back in order for not to be too boring, because they were long as your arm.
So there's a theme, there's a whole sort of internet content genre, which with apologies to any Americans who are watching this, which I characterize as Americans discovering real cultural diversity in real time. And it's an entire content genre that goes all the way from Europeans hang their washing on the line and don't use air conditioning very much, to not everybody that you welcome into your house is going to have WASP cultural mores. Do you think? I mean, you just mentioned that you've recently moved to Portugal, and although you say it's going to take you a little while to learn the language, you're evidently you've learned how to ask for two fillets of sea bass.
It's a start.
It's a start. As an American who spends some time living in Portugal, do you think there's a sense in which, perhaps as a function of being top nation and therefore in a position to Americanize other places, and really just and that being just the ordinary course of things at the moment, do you think there's a sense in which perhaps the sheer genuine diversity of cultures around the world can perhaps come particularly as a surprise, perhaps particularly to upper-class Americans, and perhaps extra particularly to WASPs?
Are you saying that Americans are just used to living even if they travel, that they live in an American universe?
I think this is hashtag not all Americans.
Right.
I think what I'm saying it's more of a perceptual thing than a strictly material one. Although there's probably a material component to it. But I suppose my comparator here is British imperial, the high era of British imperialism, where the British really did do this to a significant extent. I mean, they just took Britain with them wherever they went. They made the locals play cricket, and they imposed common law or a variant of common law, and something that looked a little bit like English parliamentary democracy, and ideally corned beef and anglicised whatever the local dishes were until they were palatable to an English tastes, and anglicised wherever it was they went, because it was just self-evident to the high imperial British that this was just objectively an improvement. But there's a corollary, and I think it's just a byproduct of imperialism. This is just what empires do. The Romans built roads and sewers, and a lot of that's good. And that's why imperialism is, whisper it, often accepted and sometimes even quietly appreciated in at least some respects.
Well, the roots are somewhat different. It's the same things going on, but it's mostly through your computer and TV screen.
I think that's definitely true now. I suppose what I'm thinking about, there's this very striking and to me very curious convergence of one, and I think this is particularly among WASP Americans, one, a fixation on the idea of diversity, and two, a sincere inability to grasp what that actually means. How comprehensively different it's possible to see the world in practice.
When Americans are celebrating diversity, they're mostly thinking of restaurants.
I think that's a phenomenon that you definitely find amongst upper middle class and upper class Brits as well.
It doesn't what doesn't spring to mind is closed Muslim communities that detest homosexuality and vote as a block, not as individuals. So they harvest the votes from their wives, and it's what doesn't come to mind is people who are different from you in a bad way, right?
Or in a way that is
in
not
terms
yeah.
in your terms,
Yeah.
Who oppress women, who mangle their genitals and not in order to change gender. That people who are actually hostile to what you believe, and dislike your society, not in that voluntary, gratuitous, but rather fun way. I think that the progressive left loves to detest its own society, but that's a kind of ideological entertainment. It's very, very different from people who really do detest your society from the outside and would like to see it fail. And so that's not the kind of diversity that the proponents of diversity ever imagine.
I think that's right. Now, you, if I remember rightly, you are the daughter of a Christian minister. Although you don't speak explicitly to or about Christian faith in the book, and it's clear that none of your characters are observant Christians, for example. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on the relation between Christian theology and the kinds of naivety that we've been talking about.
Part of the naivete is it's very Christian. It's this whole business of turn the other cheek, the obligation to help strangers. Christians are, or at least used to be. Goodness knows what they're taught now, because I am some distance from the faith myself. But Christians are taught to be self-sacrificing and to care about others, all this, it's all this generosity and selflessness. That's all very Christian. And for that, on the downside, sanctimony is very Christian, right? Self-righteousness is very Christian, because when you're always doing these good works, then you think very well of yourself.
Yeah, it has struck me forcefully recently that there seems to be a groundswell amongst observant Christians of people trying to reckon with what it means to be a Christian in the context of our new technological, communicative, and mass mobility environment. This is amongst observant Christians rather than sort of Christian heritage people who still retain some of the mores, which I think is the kind of people we're talking about in your book. In a sense, they're sort of reflexively Christian in some ways, but not in others. They're not actually observant. They've sort of, it's like a kind of afterburner of Christian faith, but expressed in a very secular key. Amongst observant Christians, there seems to be, in some quarters, something of a groundswell of people trying to reckon with what it means to be what it means to welcome the stranger without doing so to the extent that you just don't have anything to offer them anymore because they live in your house now and you don't, for example, or what it means to turn the other cheek when people are trying to kill you.
when you know that you're going to get slapped yet another. I mean, it's an odd formula. Turn the other cheek. It's like someone slapped you and you're just asking to be slapped again. I mean, how many times are you going to do this? It's almost comic.
Well, let me test a hypothesis on you. It's not a very well worked out one, but so I might get into trouble for even trying to air it. But one of the thoughts that I sort of road test a little bit sometimes is that things began to get confused in both directions at the point where Christian social teaching fused with state welfare. And that happened in Britain in the early 20th century. You know, and like most of what became the architecture of the welfare state in the United Kingdom originated as social reform movements among church ladies. You know, the flower arranging, sick visiting church busybodies of various local communities. And in medieval England, all local welfare systems were administered by the parish, and it was explicitly something that happened through the church. But then at the beginning of the 20th... It was
voluntary, though.
It was voluntary. It was opt-in, and it happened.
And we institutionalized it as mandatory. And so, if you're a taxpayer, you don't have any choice.
That's right.
But to give to the poor.
That's right, and it's struck me mulling over what happened at that point. That actually this had some unexpected effects in both directions. Not only did it make Christian charity mandatory, but it also defanged Christian faith. It
removed from the Christian faith and the churches one of their main purposes.
And in a sense, by nationalising it, it sort of neutered both of those. It neutered both of the fields that it tried to bring together and turned them into something that neither of them really quite intended to be.
Yeah, but it also turned Christian charity potentially into a catastrophe.
And one of the things, just sort of to wrap up that thought that I find myself mulling over, is whether some of the difficulties that observant Christians have with these acutely political questions of being a good Samaritan at scale, particularly where it comes to welcoming the stranger, flow from the nationalisation of Christian practice. That came with institutionalizing welfare. I wonder what you think of that, and whether you think that makes sense as a.
Well, this is what I mean, that it invites catastrophe. It's been said before, because it's true, that you cannot have open borders and a welfare state at the same time.
That much is very clear.
That is an enormous invitation to being taken advantage of to an extent that it would break the system. You will not have enough money to take care of these people.
I mean, you do actually see liberal, fiscally liberal, neoliberal and libertarian voices arguing from the right that there's a case to be made for open borders because it will destroy the welfare state.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, no, that's
that's kind of nifty and mean.
It's incredibly mean, and it's sort of a contrarian right-wing position.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's one of those things where I sort of feel be careful what you wish for, but it also feels like a mask-off moment for a particular subset of sort of, capitalism red in tooth and claw.
I'm afraid that before the system falls apart, we'll all be taxed to the eyeballs. So I'm not looking forward to that solution to the problem.
I also wonder if, returning to the theme of the afterburners of Christianity, or the secularization of Christian instincts in fields where perhaps they were never intended to be quite so institutionalized. There's a sense in which William F. Buckley famously said, "Don't immanentize the eschaton," by which he roughly translated, "Don't try and realize heaven on earth. Don't try and make imminent what is only really supposed to be realizable in the next life."
Yeah, well,
which seems like wise advice, which progressives have been not
the left
not
has been making
to.
that mistake forever, and that way leads hell on earth.
I mean,
it is ironic that when you pursue utopia too aggressively, you lead to its perfect opposite. There's no logic to that exactly, but it happens to be true, and in every instance.
Sometimes I find myself wondering if actually somewhere near the root of the problem is having lost from our public conversation the possibility of there being a transcendent realm in which we could that we could just leave utopia in, rather than trying to realize it on Earth, as every generation of leftists has more or less since Marx.
Well, that's that prospect that there is another better life, if you will.
The real that's
has
right.
always been one of the palliatives of civilization. It's like, it's okay, you're suffering now, but you'll get your reward later.
And in a sense, it's bearable to suffer in this life because this is a fallen world. At least so the theory goes. If you look at the world in these terms, that this world is always fallen and will always be fallen.
So without that promise, you have naturally greater dissatisfaction, potentially more violent dissatisfaction.
That's right.
Because there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
And there's nothing really left to pursue except this sort of war of all this fight to the death for who can get the goodies, who can get into the most comfortable country and access the best resources. And
I also think that, and I've never thought this before, but when we remove the prospect of some beautiful afterlife, it means that the model of existence is intrinsically apocalyptic. And that may help to explain why younger generations raised in a secular environment have embraced a doomsday scenario so readily, because they've never been raised with a promise of something waiting for them. All that awaits is death. And they have incorporated that into their whole vision of the future, so that all this climate change, the view of the apocalypse, is because there is. I mean,
you could probably.
I'm also secular, so I'm also just looking at writing at best a few more books and getting dementia and not being here anymore. It's not. That's not great, and also when you don't have a redemptive mythology, why do you want to have children?
Right.
And they're not.
Right, and they're not, and that's also a theme that comes across very strongly in the book. None of the children within this family have kids.
Yes.
Yet.
And in fact,
Nico is morbidly
the strongest argument that any immigrant makes in this book.
We're replacing you because you're not having kids.
You're not having kids. Yeah. She says, "Look, your sisters are in their 30s. They are,
and you're still a man-child,
right?" And he is not planning on children. He finds the prospect of fatherhood horrifying.
Yeah.
So the family's just going to disappear.
Yeah. I found the family dynamics that you depict very recognizable. They felt accurately observed for a particular subset of Anglophone middle class I think, as much English as American people.
Well,
and
Nico's living in a matriarchy.
He is, although as things stand, he is. But his father is, in a sense, his father remains the North Star.
His father is still very masculine.
His father is, after fashion. Yeah, I'll come back to masculinity because I have a question about. I have a question about the different visions of manhood. Actually, since we're there, we'll get there now. I was very struck by the theme of gender in the book, or at least the way you depict it's not exactly a battle between the sexes, but as you say, Nico lives in a matriarchy. He talks about the women.
Yes,
as a sort of
capital W.
Capital T, capital W, the women, as those they who set the moral tone, they who set the taboos, they who structure the universe within which things are or are not sayable, or are not doable, and within which this doom-laden passivity that they all fall into is just inevitable. And he's part of that. I mean, in a sense, he refuses until it's far too late to step out of this.
In a lot of ways, Nico is an honorary girl.
He is, and he becomes increasingly conscious of that and becomes increasingly pained by that as the book goes on. But he also refuses, for the vast majority of the story where we encounter him, to step out of this role of self-imposed detachment. He takes these long walks through the city as an observer and just notices, but he doesn't do anything with that. Or he spends all day watching YouTube videos and just sort of passively consuming content, and it just all sort of flows into him, but he doesn't do anything with it. And he says,
for most of the book, he has embraced this. I mean,
he's embraced this, and it's become his personality.
Religion with him that he doesn't want anything.
He doesn't want anything. He doesn't want to be anything. He doesn't want to do anything.
That's right.
He just wants to exist in this state of serenity.
So it's very conscious on his part, whereas I think that's not necessarily representative of that cadre of live-at-home young men. He has decided. Usually that's just a not deciding. But Nico has decided he does not want to have any ambition. He is not just afraid of losing the game of life. He's not playing.
He's simply
he's absolutely
removed himself
decided,
from the board.
Okay, I don't want it. I'm not interested in becoming an adult. He doesn't quite put it to himself that way, but he has no interest in building a future, and he can get away with it.
And he says at one point, I'm paraphrasing. He says he answers without thinking to the question, why are you doing this? And he says almost without thinking, because I can.
Yes.
And then realizes afterwards that that's probably the most honest answer he's ever given.
Yes.
He's just doing it because he can.
Yes, that's wise of you to have flagged that line, because I think it is a very important line in that book. And even Nico has only at that moment realized that's the explanation for where he is.
Yeah.
And Nico's relationship to masculinity is clearly very take it or leave it. He doesn't care much about being male. It doesn't distress him that he doesn't embody the masculine virtues of, aggression and strength. He doesn't go to the gym. He goes for long walks, but you know that he's not bulked out.
It's clear.
He's not a man of action. He has rejected agency. And if there's any quality that is especially male in my mind, it's agency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
do you think there's an element of self-critique in in your portrayal of Nico, in the sense that he does embody something like the objective authorial perspective, and he's created that as a personality for himself, and it leads him to catastrophe in the context of his family setting. And I wondered if there was a component of you asking questions of yourself there about what it is to be an author. Maybe.
I mean, certainly that detachment, that remove that he treasures so much. He calls it neutrality.
Yeah.
That is a pose that the author assumes. Of
That's
course,
right.
it's only a pose.
That's right.
And in fact, I impugn that pose with the very first line of the book, because the first thing out of Nico's mouth is, "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." And the following paragraph explains that he aspires to have no opinions.
That's right. And he's just vomited one out.
It's
just come out.
So
That's
it's
right.
It's a lost cause. And maybe Nico's aiming for no opinions, for neutrality, is my own. There's an element of my own frustration or hypocrisy that perhaps the ideal author is simply a perfect, unbiased observer, and I cannot inhabit that role.
No, and
from the very first line of my own book.
I mean, in a sense, it sort of contains its own postmodern critique and does that quite elegantly, in the sense that from a postmodern point of view, the view would be that neutrality is simply not possible. So I suppose in that sense, it's sort of it's fairly elegant to have punctured that.
Yes, it's basically. Yes, I'm admitting. I know.
Yeah.
I have
my
views
up,
about immigration, and if you read my Spectator column, you know what they are. I haven't been shy.
Right. So in that sense, if you might as well occupy that stance and play with that stance, and then subject that stance to a rigorous.
It is certainly a book written by someone who is a restrictionist on immigration, and I'm not embarrassed about that fact, because all the other books written about immigration are unembarrassedly written from the perspective of somebody who is either a de facto open borders advocate, or at least just overwhelmingly sympathetic with the immigrant story, to the point where there is no story for the host population, which that's just the backdrop.
In a sense, the host population have been reduced to the naive cipher who's not understood as fully human, or having, in the sense of having needs or resentments or wishes or their own existential
in
requirements.
Immigration stories, they're always told from the perspective of the immigrant, and if you'll either have natives who are helpful and nice, or then they'll be bigots and terribly unpleasant.
Yeah, I'm going to leave my crypto-Marxist hat off, but there is an alternative way of reading that situation, which is straightforwardly about resource competition, which takes it out of the heavily moralized realm. But unfortunately, that's not that's a terrain that you very clearly and eloquently explore in A Better Life, but it's not one that we're often allowed to discuss at all. The experience, there are flows of people competing for resources, competing for land, competing for food, competing for the better life.
Yes, and that's closer to my view than the more the merrier.
So going back to gender for a minute, because it's such an interesting sub theme. It's a fairly front and center theme in the book. The question of gender and agency and feminization. Mm-hmm. Which you don't really spell out, but it's implicitly present as a component in what's happening, or rather in what's not happening. I think that would be more accurate. What doesn't get done, setting boundaries. What doesn't get said, I need you to leave. What doesn't get achieved, the force needed to actually execute any kind of boundary setting.
In fact, Nico, that's what doesn't happen in the feminized environment is resort to force.
That's right.
Because for women, that is not their power, their advantage. We are the physically weaker sex, and that has psychic implications. The tools that you regard as at your disposal to get what you want don't include guns, for example, right? You don't think in terms of force. You think of terms of argument, right? But not
persuasion, shame,
guilt. Yes, exactly. Those are our tools.
That's right.
You don't go beat somebody up.
No. Well, generally speaking, that's just not physically practical.
It's just the odds are not on your side.
And it strikes me that there are three distinct models of masculinity that are present in the book. We have Nico, who's sort of opted out of what you might call traditional archetypal masculinity. He's not agentic. He's consciously chosen not to do, and he's consciously chosen not to assert himself. And that's he's sort of made the neutral observer his personality. Then you have his dad, who is much more masculine in that archetypal sense. He has agency. He has. I did particularly enjoy the way you set up the boomer gunslinger posse and then deflated it again. Yes, that was unexpected. That was really fun. But it just didn't go.
I have never met anybody who read this book and saw the ending coming.
No, no. I didn't. There were. Yeah, you keep the paths forking all the way to the end. And yet, these aging guys who very seriously set out to get their guns and actually try and assert themselves in that much more old-fashioned this town ain't big enough for the both of us.
It's a model for masculinity that I set up and then immediately
immediately deflated it again. Because there's also a sense in which, despite,
but it's still a relief for the reader that somebody is doing something.
That's right. It's a relief when it comes, and then it's honestly a relief when it's just deflated, because you can just see it going horribly wrong because it's still.
I set it up in such a way that the reader is certain that this is going to completely backfire. And
it's going to be absolutely horrendous, because you think you're going up against what
you have no idea.
You have no idea what this is. Don't do this.
Yeah,
Please
don't know
do
what
this.
you're doing.
Don't do this.
It's very touching, but you people are idiots.
But there's a sense in which what you seem to be implying is that kind of agentic masculinity is dying out with the boomer generation. That they're trying, but even then they're going through the motions. And let's face it, they're all in their 60s. I mean, is that fair, or am I overreading?
Well, there has been a lot of rejection of traditional masculinity. And that is a loss. And there is an appeal in the book to that there's a place for rediscovering these qualities without which we cannot survive as a civilization.
Because pretty much the only flicker of that you see is in Nico's old school friend, who pops up briefly as a side character, the son of his parents' documentary maker friends.
Yes.
Of whom the dad is a rabid restrictionist. And even in that situation, the wife, who's editing this furiously immigration restrictionist documentary and trying to make it palatable to the major streaming platforms, even she is trying to tone the message down. So there's this sense even among...
And that's the female again, trying to take the edges off.
And that's the female again trying to take the edges off. And then Nico's school friend pops up sort of as a cameo, and he seems to be doing fine.
Yes,
he hasn't checked out of life. He's a functional young adult.
Model of being a young man, and I think he's portrayed as very likable and not necessarily as some kind of cardboard cutout. Nevertheless, he got into drugs and stuff, typical way, got very bad grades, but finally went straight, was willing to go to a lower order university, Georgia Tech, got educated in a useful profession, and
now he's getting married.
And so,
I think I can spoil that, right?
Yeah, and he's making good money because he's in tech, and is planning to get married, and is already planning to have children. He's 27, and his friend Nico, who's the same age, thinks, well, whoa, already? Well, 27 is a very good age to start having children, certainly to start thinking about it. And I mean to call attention to that.
And it seems
that is what you should be doing at 27, if not 26 or 25.
And I think if there's the most potent rebuke in the whole book there are a great many rebukes. The whole book is composed almost entirely of very wittily arranged and terrifying to read rebukes to all sorts of people. But one of the most poignant, to me, seemed the only agentic men who really take central stage in the book. You know, with the exception of Nico's old school friend who sort of pops up and then disappears into his. Hopefully, you know, we wish him well, but he's gone. And meanwhile, the only men who seem able to do what they want and take what they need are these gangsters. Are the gangsters?
Yes.
Who've cuckooed this house
Yeah.
and
they're very physically strong.
And their physical presence comes across very, very powerfully in the book. You know, you describe them as covered in ink and, you know, wandering around in their boxers with the button undone, eating whatever they want and, you know, grinding out their cigarettes on the beautiful carpet and just trashing the place. And this is the only model of agentic masculinity we have, which is this sort of brutish kind of violent, undereducated gangster model. And I mean,
there's certainly a corollary in real life for that, especially coming up from Central America.
Are you implying that in the prevailing WASP culture of America, this is the lacuna? This is the missing component. Is anything comparable to or able to go up against that kind of aggressive masculinity?
Well, you can't counter that kind of masculinity without having some of it yourself, right?
That's certainly the lesson that Nico learns, isn't it?
Yes, and that pertains to officialdom as well. I mean, the cops in this book are portrayed as completely useless. And you know, I did my research on that. I think they've changed the laws a little bit in New York City, but for many years it's been possible to squat in somebody's home, and it's impossible to get them out. It's your property, and yet all these laws protect the person who's squatting. It's the same way in which we have so many laws that protect the illegal immigrant, and that's why they're so hard to get rid of. So that impotence that has infused the society has also infused law enforcement.
Perhaps would it be fair to say that the desire to not have to be agentic, to not have to move things yourself, has resulted in this sort of architecture of institutionalized norms and mores instead, as a kind of substitute for action. So instead of sort of Nietzschean dog-eat-dog world, we have laws and norms, and we have the rule of law.
Yes.
In essence,
that is substituting for the assertion that more masculine assertion of you can't do that because I'm not going to let you.
And I mean, to be clear,
we now have an increasingly feminized legal system.
I mean, I like
this is especially the case with immigration.
I'll be honest, I like the rule of law. You know, I really appreciate living in a country where property titles mean something. You know, and by and large, when people say they're going to do something, they do it. You know, all of these things are great, but it seems to me that you're pointing towards a failure mode for that kind of civilization.
Yes, and these ICE raids in the United States are a good example. That is the use of force. And you don't have permission to be here, and you won't leave by yourself, so we are going to physically take you and remove you from the country. That is a muscular use of the legal system, but it does require literal muscle.
And it's very clear that I mean, to put it mildly, there's a range of views on how acceptable that.
I'm not defending the style in which these raids are being done, and I'm not defending shooting American citizens who are protesting these raids. So, you know, leave that aside.
I mean, in principle,
the reaction to these raids on a popular level, and that includes a lot of people who voted for Trump, is queasy, right? The enforcement of immigration law is uncomfortable for Americans, and they're not sure they liked it abstractly before the election.
But now they're uncomfortable with it.
Now, when they see what it looks like, they don't like it.
So let me put something.
They have a kind of girly reaction to these raids. Oh, that doesn't seem very nice.
So let me put.
Oh no, that look at the little boy. He's so cute.
Let me put something to you. Going back to Nico, who's basement dwelling because he can. One of the themes which I found interesting is the dynamics within the family. Nico goes to have dinner with his dad, who's divorced from his mum. He sees his dad periodically, and his dad always beasts him about, or quizzes him about what he's doing. But he doesn't do anything. He doesn't do anything. Nico just says nobody does, and he never says you have to do X. Neither does his mum ever say you have to do X. Neither do either of them ever say you should do X.
No,
even.
It's implied by
implied.
Like, what are you going to do now?
But nobody ever says it.
No.
I mean, this is obviously not all boomers, but there is a quality of, and I say this as a child of that generation. There's a genuinely well-meaning aspect to the culture which developed with the first post-war generation, which is morbidly averse to normative statements, I think you might say.
Averse to normative statements, aversive to coercion of any kind. Of any kind, even,
and
that is not the way Nico has been educated. That is in a world of coercion.
That's
it's completely foreign to him.
That's right, because his parents have simply assumed that you can raise a child without ever having to say no. Here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
This is what you're now going to do.
And we know the gentle parenting movement. I mean, that's all about. You don't ever say no. You don't ever direct. You maybe you encourage. But it's a very fearful on the part of the parent style of parenting. It's like there's this delicate, precious thing, and you wouldn't want to push it or poke it or much less hit it. I mean, you're a kind of.
You have to persuade.
You have to persuade,
and it has to be chosen.
And it has to be. You have to persuade nicely.
So my sense is that you are pointing in this dynamic.
Whereas in truth, you're dealing with a wild animal.
Well, no, I think it's perfectly legitimate if your toddler is saying, "I'm not going to get in the bath." You're like, "No, you are," and you just put them in the bath. Yeah. This is entirely reasonable.
I think we've made parenthood incredibly difficult just by removing a whole host of coercive tools.
The accounts and the first-hand accounts are now emerging from people who've tried gentle parenting, which very much bear out your thesis. But it seems to me that you're pointing to an as above, so below correspondence between the aversion, the anti-coercive shibboleth, this terror of coercion and terror of normative statements at the micro scale of Nico's family, to the macro scale of the polity as a whole and its ability or lack of ability to enforce its own physical borders. Do you think that's, again, am I overreading, or do you think that's
in terms of
just correspondence?
The overall gestalt of the book, I think that's sound. Certainly there's a parallel between the soft borders of the house and the soft borders of the country. They kind of meld, and what the consequences are of not enforcing your own rules.
The microcosm and the macrocosm. So do you think is there something redemptive then in Nico's, after the catastrophe, where the book is so good, you all have to read it, it's gripping.
Oh, I'm
the
so
catastrophe
glad you
is
finally
amazing.
said that.
No, I hope I've been implying it all the way through, but honestly I couldn't put it down. Anytime I read it on a plane, and every time one of my family tapped me on the shoulder because they wanted to, I was like, I've got 3 hours left to finish this book, and I can't put it down. It's so good. The book is so great. But did you mean the ending as a redemptive one, in a
Yes,
sense
I did.
that the catastrophe happens and Nico finally re-engages in this very much more low status way, this sort of implicitly nouveau pauvre way, with the world of atoms?
Yes.
In his choice, he finally gets.
I have him engaged with the physical world, not theory.
So he's not scrolling, he's not thinking, he's not observing. He's back down in the world of atoms.
Yes.
And my sense is that you see that's where you see the way forward. That young men need to get off. Yeah,
it's all very Jordan Peterson.
But do you see any signs of hope? On that front, is there anything? Do you have any reasons to be hopeful, reasons to be cheerful in terms of the overall direction of travel in the world?
Well, in all honesty, I think some of the people who follow Jordan Peterson, I don't know what kind of shape he's in right now, but that there is something powerfully positive about that movement.
Yeah,
it's a little religious for me. I mean, it's not the movement itself is not necessarily aggressively Christian, but it is in texture. Nevertheless, that whole make your bed, get off your butt, go out there and, become educated, have a family, protect your women,
It's all pretty basic stuff, isn't it?
It is super basic, and we've gone too far.
One of the best advice my grandma ever gave me, even though it wasn't really, she didn't put it like this, but it was in essence, try and be basic, just be normal.
Yeah,
just try to do the normal thing.
And I have in my columns I've definitely been arguing for the restoration of the very norms that my own generation helped to destroy. And I'm sure that I participated in the eagerness to destroy norms like marriage and childbearing myself. And before we stop talking, I should make sure to include that you were talking about the number of rebukes in this novel. One of the rebukes is to myself, because there is a clear pro-natalist theme in the book. But I did not have any children. So, the low fertility world that we're living in, I helped to create. Now, what made it possible for me to not have children, and I declared I didn't want kids when I was 8 years old, I have no maternal instinct, was that was counter to the norm at the time. So, but you can't have a society in which that's the norm. That's a suicidal.
But pretty much by
society.
Definition, you can't have a society that refuses to self-reproduce.
You can have a society for a single generation like that,
and then after that, you don't have it anymore.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah. And we don't for a long time, we have not been taking that seriously.
I mean, my sense is
that includes me.
I think you're right. I think you're right to pin your hopes on the Nikos of this world re-engaging with the world of atoms, because I concur with you that I see that happening. Not everywhere, and not in every. Not in every case, but I see it happening. I see people painfully reverse engineering, sometimes from first principles, all of these things which your grandma told you, or if your grandma was alive during the war, she told you.
Yes, and if you're going to be practical,
humans can't change sex. The world really is solid.
Yeah,
the laws of physics apply.
Go back to this. Yes.
Go outside, touch grass.
Right, and so. One of the solutions to the employment crisis that we keep being told we're facing with the advent of AI is to go back to the physical world. Make yourself useful for the physical world. Now, maybe there is way out there a roboticized world that is going to replace all the plumbers and the carpenters, people who can make things, physical things that are unique. But it's not here, and one of the most reliable ways to earn a good living right now is to skip college, don't go to university, so don't get into debt for an education that may end up being useless to you, and learn how to manipulate material.
I think that's probably a hopeful and very literally solid note to end on. Lionel Shriver, it's been such a pleasure having you.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, and it's a big relief to do a podcast and not repeat myself too much.
Thank you so much. You might be thinking, that's not Eric Metaxas. My name's Mary Harrington. I'm a writer and a past contributor to Socrates in the City. I'm thrilled to be joining Socrates in the City as the first inaugural Socrates contributor. Throughout 2026, I'll be hosting many fascinating conversations on life, God, and other small topics. Be sure to subscribe to get notifications whenever a new episode from Eric or myself drops. And thank you for tuning in.